It is May 11th, 1982, in Boston, Massachusetts. A man sits in a parked car, watching the entrance of a famous restaurant, Anthony's Pier 4. He holds a walkie-talkie in his hand. Inside the restaurant, two men are just finishing their meal. One is Brian Balloonhead Halloran, a small-time criminal. He made a fatal mistake. He spoke to the FBI. The other man is Michael Donahue. He is an innocent father of three with no connection to Boston's criminal world. His only crime was offering a coworker a ride home on the wrong day. Behind the wheel of the parked car sits James Whitey Bulger, the most feared gangster in South Boston. He is wearing a disguise, a wig, and a fake mustache. He waits patiently, his eyes carefully scanning the quiet waterfront. Bulger's most trusted lieutenant watches carefully. He sees the two men leave the restaurant and walk towards a sky-blue Datsun car. He raises his walkie-talkie to his mouth and speaks. He says, "The balloon is rising." As the Datsun car pulls out of the parking lot, he speaks into the radio again. The balloon is in the air. Hearing this message, Bulger puts his own car into drive and follows them. Donahue is killed instantly when the shooting starts. Halloran somehow stumbles out of the bullet-riddled car, but he cannot escape. More gunshots echo loudly across the harbor, and Halloran falls to the pavement. The mission is now complete. In a separate, quiet office, FBI Agent John Connolly sits alone at his desk. He picks up his telephone and dials a secret number, one that very few people know. When the line connects, he speaks quietly. "Listen carefully, Whitey. We have a problem. Halloran is cooperating with us about the murder. You know which one I mean. In the history of American law enforcement, there has never been a case of corruption more devastating than the unholy alliance between the Federal Bureau of Investigation and James Whitey Bulger. And it all began with a simple handshake between two boys from the same South Boston neighborhood. South Boston, or Southie to those who called it home, wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a fortress. It was an Irish Catholic working-class community, bound by an unwritten code. This code was as strict as any mafia oath. The rule was loyalty above all else. In this close-knit world of local shops and old churches, two boys were growing up. They lived just a few blocks from each other. One man would become Boston's most feared criminal. The other would rise to the top of the FBI. At just 14 years old, while most kids were playing outside, James Whitey Bulger was already building his reputation. He joined street gangs, moving from small thefts to armed robbery. John Connolly was 6 years younger. But to him, Whitey Bulger wasn't just a name whispered on the streets. He was a local legend, a fearless neighborhood enforcer who never backed down, even as a teenager. You see, Bulger had a strict code: protect your own. He would hand out ice cream to the local boys and crush bullies without a second thought. One day, when young Connolly was cornered by some older kids, Bulger stepped in without hesitation. That single moment created a powerful bond. It was a quiet loyalty, a debt that would echo for decades. This was long after Bulger traded South Boston for a life in the underworld. By the early 1960s, their paths had completely split. Bulger was sent to Alcatraz for armed robbery, where he learned the tricks of organized crime from hardened criminals. Meanwhile, John Connolly graduated from the FBI Academy in 1968. After serving in FBI offices across the country, Agent John Connolly requested a transfer back to his home city, Boston. He had one clear career goal: to take down the Italian Mafia. This was the powerful crime family that dominated all organized crime in New England. By 1975, a man named Whitey Bulger had completely transformed himself. He had been released from prison 10 years earlier, and he returned to the streets of South Boston with a new, ruthless discipline. He carefully worked his way up through the ranks of the Winter Hill Gang, an Irish criminal organization that operated in the dark shadows of Boston's underworld. Then, in the fall of 1975, in the neighborhood of South Boston, a cold wind blew through a quiet parking lot near the Old Harbor Project. This is where Agent John Connolly comes face to face with Whitey Bulger. It was their first official meeting. The neighborhood boys from South Boston are now grown men in their 40s. FBI agent John Connolly makes his pitch to one of them, James Whitey Bulger. He tells him a terrifying secret. The Italian mafia is feeding information about Bulger's crew to the FBI. Connolly warns Bulger that if he doesn't act first, he will be the next target. Bulger listens carefully, but he doesn't give an answer. He simply leaves, with Connolly waiting in the dark, not knowing what he will do. Days pass without a word. Then, a message arrives. One of Bulger's own men has been gunned down, killed by a soldier from the Italian mob. That same day, Connolly's phone rings. It's Bulger. He is in. On September 30th, 1975, the name James Whitey Bulger officially enters the FBI's informant files. His code name is BS-1544-TE, Top Echelon. This was a special title reserved for the FBI's most elite and valuable sources. But what they had really created was a monster on a leash. What the FBI didn't understand was a simple, dangerous truth. They hadn't recruited Bulger. Bulger had recruited them. This handshake deal from 1975 quickly proved its value. Within just a few months of becoming an informant, Bulger began giving the FBI intelligence on his main rivals, the Patriarca crime family and their Boston operation, which was run by the Angulo brothers. Bulger's inside information about the Angulo gang's gambling and loan sharking operations gave the FBI exactly what they needed. Every piece of information that hurt the Italian mafia cleared the way for Bulger's own gang to expand. At first, this arrangement seemed to benefit everyone. By 1981, Bulger's intelligence had helped the FBI build a rock-solid case against the Angulos. The arrests made headlines across the nation. The FBI had won a major victory against organized crime. For Agent Connolly, these wins were career-making. He became a star within the Bureau, praised as the man who finally cracked Boston's mafia. His supervisor, John Morris, also received promotions. Internal FBI memos even described Bulger as one of the most valuable and highly placed informants in the entire Boston area. Behind the headlines, a darker story was unfolding. As the Patriarca crime family's power faded, the Winter Hill Gang moved in to take over. Their leader, Whitey Bulger, seized control of gambling, loan sharking, and protection rackets. His influence spread across Boston and beyond. The FBI's valuable informant wasn't just giving them information. He was secretly using the FBI to build his own criminal empire. Then, in 1982, FBI agent John Connolly hosted a dinner at his home. The guest list was unusual. It included his boss, John Morris, along with Winter Hill gang leaders Whitey Bulger and Steve Flemmi. The agent's relationship with Bulger was changing. It was no longer just about handling an informant. It was becoming a dangerous compromise. The agents were starting to realize that their careers and even their safety now depended on keeping Bulger happy and protected. But what Agent Morris didn't fully understand that night was the true depth of Bulger's brutality. The leader of the Winter Hill Gang had already arranged many murders, but the case of Brian Halloran showed how deadly his partnership with the FBI had become. In early May of 1982, Halloran, a low-level member of the gang, secretly met with federal agents. He was nervous, but also desperate. Halloran claimed he had information. He said he could prove that Whitey Bulger was directly responsible for killing Roger Wheeler, a well-known businessman from Oklahoma. For the FBI, this was a potential breakthrough in the case. However, inside the Boston office, this secret information was not kept safe. The FBI ignored Halloran's repeated requests for protection. Instead, Agent John Connolly took that intelligence and delivered it directly to Whitey Bulger. Just a few weeks later, Brian Halloran was executed in the middle of the day on the Boston waterfront. With him was Michael Donahue, a father of 3 who had no connection to organized crime. He was simply giving Halloran a ride home that day. Both men were killed in a ruthless shooting. The message was sent: betray Whitey Bulger, and you will disappear. And that was true even if you were just an innocent bystander. But the corruption didn't stop with leaking deadly secrets. Both Agent Connolly and Agent Morris started accepting thousands of dollars. The money was for keeping quiet and giving Bulger useful information. Morris later admitted he took the payments partly out of fear. He felt that once he crossed that ethical line with Bulger, he was trapped. However, the evidence shows that both agents enjoyed their cozy, friendly relationship with Boston's most famous gangster. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Bulger was feeding the FBI information that was much less valuable than they thought. His official FBI file, carefully managed by Connolly, was filled with intelligence that actually came from other informants. Connolly wrote fake reports to make Bulger seem more helpful than he really was. He did all this to protect his childhood hero. Because of this, the Massachusetts State Police and the Drug Enforcement Administration grew very frustrated. Their investigations into Bulger's gang kept falling apart for mysterious reasons. Surveillance locations were compromised, wiretaps were discovered, and witnesses were intimidated. For years, police outside the FBI were confused. The criminal, James Bulger, always seemed to know their next move. Finally, they started to suspect a terrible truth. Maybe Bulger had a protector inside the FBI itself. Now let's go back to 1981. A young woman named Deborah Davis, who was 26 years old, was the girlfriend of Bulger's partner, a man named Stephen the Rifleman Flemmi. Deborah discovered a dangerous secret. Flemmi had told her that he and Bulger were secretly working as informants for the FBI. This was the kind of information that could get someone killed, and sadly, it did. Deborah was taken to an empty house in South Boston, a house that Flemmi had just bought. As she walked inside, James Bulger grabbed her from behind. He wrapped his arm tightly around her throat. Stephen Flemmi stood and watched as Bulger strangled the young woman to death. Afterward, the 2 men buried her body near the Neponset River. Her remains would stay hidden there, undiscovered, for decades. This calculated brutality revealed the true Whitey Bulger. The public saw him as a protector of his neighborhood, a man who kept drugs away from local children. But this was just a mask. Behind it, he was the leader of a ruthless criminal empire. Court records later proved that Bulger controlled a massive drug operation. He took a cut of the profits from every dealer in his territory. At the same time, he was a secret informant for the FBI. He gave them information about his rival drug traffickers. This created a perfect circle of corruption. He eliminated his competition, and he made millions of dollars. Psychologists who later studied Bulger described him as a textbook sociopath. He felt no empathy for others, but he was a master at manipulating people. He knew exactly how to play on Agent Connolly's admiration for the Bulger family. He also understood Connolly's desire to advance his career. And by this time, Connolly had become a supervisor at the Boston FBI office. This made him an even more valuable target for Bulger's manipulation. His promotion wasn't just a step up in his career. It gave him even more power to protect the gangster Whitey Bulger and keep him safe from the FBI. In return, Bulger paid him huge amounts of cash, later estimated to be over $200,000. This dirty money allowed the agent to live a lifestyle that no honest federal agent could ever afford. By the late 1980s, other police agencies were getting very frustrated. The Massachusetts State Police, the DEA, and even other FBI agents started to ask a tough question. Why was Whitey Bulger seemingly untouchable? Why couldn't anyone prosecute him? But the full story of this corruption and the shocking number of deaths it caused would stay hidden for years. Then, as the 1990s began, this dangerous secret agreement was about to face its first major test. The first serious challenge came from a place nobody expected. A team of investigative reporters at the Boston Globe, called the Spotlight Unit, had started digging. They began asking very uncomfortable questions about why Bulger appeared to be immune from the law. Our story takes a dramatic turn as new reports come to light. These reports suggest that the relationship between the gangster Whitey Bulger and the FBI was far deeper than a normal informant arrangement. This media attention created public pressure that the FBI could no longer control. Inside the FBI itself, a new generation of agents was rising. These agents had no old loyalties to the corrupt agent, John Connolly. They began to look at the Winter Hill Gang with fresh eyes and suspicion. Then, in 1990, a new special agent in charge arrived at the Boston FBI office. Unlike the leaders before him, he was not part of the old guard that had protected Bulger. He started asking a very tough question. Why was this one informant considered untouchable? All this growing pressure was too much for another agent, John Morris. He was consumed by guilt and terrified of being exposed. So, Morris made a decision that would finally break the entire corrupt system. In April of 1995, Morris confessed everything. He went to federal prosecutors and to the Boston Globe newspaper. He admitted to taking bribes from Whitey Bulger. He admitted to helping protect Bulger from investigations. And, most damning of all, he confirmed the FBI's darkest secret, that by leaking the names of informants, the Bureau had been complicit in multiple murders. Federal prosecutors finally had what they needed, thanks to Morris's testimony. They prepared an indictment against Bulger Flemmi and several of his associates. The charges were serious: extortion, racketeering, and involvement in 19 murders. For the corrupt agent, John Connolly, everything was falling apart. But he had one final, fateful act of corruption to commit. According to later testimony, Connolly discovered the secret indictment against Bulger before the arrest could happen. On December 23, 1994, he made a phone call that would define the next chapter of this story. Because of Connolly's tip-off, Bulger disappeared just hours before federal agents arrived to arrest him. His longtime girlfriend, Catherine Grigg, went with him. They left their apartment in a hurry, empty of any valuables and cash. Bulger had been preparing for this moment for a long time. He had multiple fake identities and cash reserves already in place. By January 1995, the notorious James Whitey Bulger was officially added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. But the agent who had helped him, John Connolly, remained with the FBI for 2 more years. During that time, the full story of his corruption was still hidden. While Bulger managed to escape, his partner, Stephen the Rifleman, Flemmi, was not so lucky. Flemmi was arrested in that same month, January 1995. Facing serious charges, Flemy's legal team made a stunning move in court. They claimed that he and Bulger had been granted immunity by the FBI. They argued that in exchange for information about other criminals, the FBI had promised to protect them from prosecution for their own crimes. This official court filing blew the lid off the secret, corrupt relationship. It forced the government to finally confront decades of misconduct within the FBI. The scandal quickly reached the highest levels of power. Congress held public hearings to investigate the corruption. The FBI launched its own internal investigations. The entire Boston FBI office was completely reorganized, and John Connolly, the former FBI agent, found himself on the other side of the law. He was now facing the very justice system he had once sworn to represent. In December of 1999, John Connolly was formally charged with serious crimes, including racketeering, obstruction of justice, and lying to federal agents. His trial shocked the nation, as it revealed the full, corrupt relationship between the FBI and Boston's most dangerous criminals. In 2002, Connolly was found guilty and sent to federal prison for 10 years. Later, he would face even more serious charges for his involvement in several murders. Meanwhile, his infamous informant, Whitey Bulger, had simply vanished. Despite one of the biggest manhunts in FBI history, he seemed to have disappeared into thin air. The global search for Bulger stretched across continents. There were reported sightings of him in London, Sicily, Uruguay, and many other places. The FBI received thousands of tips, but Bulger was never found. The truth, however, was far less dramatic than the rumors suggested. While investigators searched the world, Whitey Bulger and his girlfriend, Catherine Grieg, were living a quiet, hidden life in a very ordinary apartment in Santa Monica, California. For years, they lived quietly under the names Charles and Carol Gasco. To their neighbors, they were just a nice, elderly couple who kept to themselves. But for the families of James Bulger's victims, every year that he remained free only made their pain worse. The children of Michael Donahue, an innocent man killed alongside the informant Brian Halloran, grew up. They started their own families, all while continuing to fight for justice for their father. At the same time, the United States government faced a serious problem. In a major 2009 court decision, a federal judge ruled that the FBI was responsible for the deaths of Halloran and Donahue. The judge found that the FBI's corrupt protection of Bulger had directly led to their murders. The court first ordered the government to pay the two families a combined $8.2 million. However, this decision was later overturned. Another court ruled that the families had filed their legal claims too late. John Connolly's fall from grace continued. In 2008, he was convicted of second-degree murder. He was found guilty for his role in the killing of John Callahan, a man who was a victim of Bulger. Connolly had leaked Callahan's identity to the gang. The court sentenced Connolly to 40 years in prison. This was effectively a life sentence for the aging former FBI agent. Meanwhile, by 2011, the hunt for Whitey Bulger was intensifying. The FBI doubled the reward for information leading to his capture to $2 million. They started a new plan to find his girlfriend, Catherine Grieg. They used public service announcements, targeting places where women her age might go. Then, on June 22, 2011, the 16-year manhunt came to a sudden end. A former neighbor from Santa Monica saw a news story about Catherine Grieg. She immediately connected it to an elderly couple she had known as Carol and Charlie Gasco. Authorities set a trap. They lured Bulger to his building's garage, with a story about a break-in. When he arrived, they confronted him. The most wanted criminal in America, who was once the FBI's own protected informant, was finally in handcuffs. Later, on August 12, 2013, the jury reached a decision. Whitey Bulger was found guilty on 31 of 32 charges. This included his involvement in 11 murders. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison, plus 5 more years. It was a sentence he would never live to complete. Bulger was moved between several different prisons. Finally, in October of 2018, he arrived at the Hazleton Federal Penitentiary in West Virginia. Despite his famous crimes and his old age, he was 89 years old. He was placed in the general population with all the other inmates. But less than 12 hours after he arrived, on October 30th, 2018, other inmates beat Bulger to death. The attack was extremely violent. He was beaten with a lock wrapped inside a sock, and his eyes were nearly gouged out. For many people, this brutal end was seen as final justice for a man who had caused so much pain to others. However, the true tragedy of this story is not about Bulger's infamous legacy. The real tragedy lies in the lives he destroyed. The Donahue family spent 37 long years fighting for justice. The Davis family waited 19 painful years before Deborah's remains were finally found. And some families never received any closure at all. The FBI's deal with the gangster Whitey Bulger was much more than just a simple mistake. It was a deep betrayal. This agreement cost innocent people their lives. It corrupted our justice system, and it destroyed the public's trust. This story is a powerful reminder. The line between our police and criminals must always be clear and strong. Because when that line becomes blurry, everyone becomes a part of the problem. And in the end, no one escapes the damage. Not the criminals, not their protectors, and certainly not the innocent.